the arrow. Click mute again.
All right, it is 1 o'clock. We will start this meeting. Thank you for starting the recording. I would like to call to order this meeting of the WIFA Federal Programs Committee, and I will call roll. Donna Michaels.
Just correction, this is the Water Supply Development.
I'm sorry, Water Supply Development meeting. Yes. Apologize. Donna Michaels. Drew John.
Here.
Treese Horseman.
Present.
Pete Kim. Sue Montgomery.
Here.
Ted Cook. Here. And Jonathan Lyons. If Donna or Pete join, will you please let me know?
Donna has joined. I think there's just an issue with the mute button. I mean, we don't expect Mr. Kim to be.
I'm trusting you can hear me now, and I'm present.
You know, thank you. For
That's
the record,
terrific.
For the record, please remember to identify yourself when making a motion or requesting to speak. Please ensure you are unmuted for any votes. And for those in the room, please remember to leave the microphones on the table. Ted, that's you. For sound quality purposes. In addition, if any member wishes to depart the meeting at any time, please announce your departure for our recorded meeting records. As this is the first meeting of the Water Supply Development Committee since the new members we were appointed for the board of fiscal year 2027, the committee will need to elect a chairman for this fiscal year. However, given the scheduling conflicts of several committee members, staff had recommended, I agree that we should defer the chairmanship election until after the time when all the members are able to be present. And I have agreed to chair this meeting at this time. Agenda item number 2. Joe, have we received any disclosures of conflicts of interest?
No disclosures have been submitted for today's meeting.
Wonderful. We will go to agenda item number 3, Director's Report. Director McGuire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you stepping in to chair this meeting on behalf of a currently unelected chairman. When we originally polled for the timing of this meeting, we didn't expect to have as many of you on as we did. So one, thanks for coming on. I know all of you have really busy schedules, but as the chairman said, we'll just defer the official election of the chair of the committee to another meeting. Welcome back, by the way, after kind of a long hiatus. We've got a few things to cover.
I'd like to hear it.
I won't steal the thunder of anybody who's reporting today to talk about financial updates and etc. But just want to say
Put your earphones away.
And we're really happy to have you here.
Wonderful.
And I think that's it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go to agenda item number.
Thank you. So the purpose of this presentation is to give the committee an update of where we're at financially when it comes to the Water Supply Development Revolving Fund, both in the short term and in the long term. So this is just a snapshot of where we're at currently. We started the fiscal year at 158 million. We had interest earnings of 5.8 million, disbursements of about 8 million, admin costs of 259,000. And then the bad news is we also had 20 million swept from the fund. So that leaves us with a cash balance of 135.6 million. We do have future commitments of about 75 million and available funds at 60.8 million. I just want to stress this is a snapshot. So disbursements and interest earnings are going to vary over time. So that $60 million, I'm very confident that we're going to have at least $66 million to work with over the next fiscal year. So if we go to the next slide. When we look at our commitments, just want to drill down into this a little bit more. We had previously said that we wanted to award 150 million. That would be 60 million in grants and 90 million in loans. Currently, we're sitting at 66.2 million. Most of the remaining funds is in the loan category, which you can see is about, if I can do my math, is about 22.4 or $23.4 million left. Lindsay's going to present a PPL of about $16.8 million, which means we have about $49.9 million if the board and the committee approves the entire PPL. Go to the next slide. So that's the data, and that shows what we've been doing historically. Now let's talk about what we want to do moving forward into the future. If you remember, when we have done our financial planning for this fund previously, we were looking at not only doing the $150 million of awarded in grants and loans, but we also, starting in fiscal year 33, wanted to use those funds that revolved and start an annual program that consisted of about 13.25, and that would consist of a 75% loans and 25% grants. That program was sustainable for 20 years. That also, when you put in the new numbers with our new cash balances, including the $20 million that was swept, that no longer is sustainable. So I ran, just to give the committee a little bit of context, I ran 3 other scenarios. One was I lowered the amounts. We still are able to start a revolving program in fiscal year 33, but I lowered the amounts and did one where we were 100% loans. And then we can have a program of about $12.2 million starting in fiscal year 33. Or we could do a combination of loans and grants, but that amount has to be lowered to $11 million. Those 2 options are sustainable over a 20-year period. And then the last option we looked at was, of course, trying to get the money out as fast as we possibly can, which means 100% going towards grants. So if we go to the next slide, of course, I have this all in graphs to explain it a little bit more clearly. On this chart, if we look at the bars, you can see in 27 through 29, and again, this is the original proposal, as far as the bars go. You can see that we've got our remaining funds to award in loans. And then starting in 2033, you can see the combination of loans and grants that we initially had thought, or what our path was, with $10 million in loans and about $3.3 million in grants. Now, if you look at the green line is our cash balance as it stands today. So we're starting off at $135.6 million. And you can see if we try to apply this program, we basically go negative in 2039. So our cash balances do not sustain this program for 20 years. So then if you go to the next slide, I've got the 2 scenarios. The one where we have 100% loans, we lower it to $12.2 million. And you can see that it does sustain itself. Even though the line gets really close at the bottom there, really there's about a $2 million fund balance in those years. But we could do a loan program of an annual amount of about $12.2 million starting in 2033.
And Denise, just to clarify, that means $12.2 million across the entire loan program, not $12.2 million per loan, but that is how much.
That's the total
we could
annual
loan,
amount.
or we can lend. Okay.
Correct. And then in scenario 2, the total annual amount is $11 million, but in this program, we're breaking it up between loans and grants. I do think that for us to have a competitive program, we need a grant portion. So we would be looking at 8.2 million in total for all loans and 2.8 million for grants. And that program also is sustainable over the next 20 years. And then the next option or scenario is to basically get this money out as fast as we possibly can. Just want to remind the committee, we do have a $2 million cap on each of our grants. We have existing $23.4 million in loans that the board has already approved. And of that amount, 12.5 has already closed. So those loans that have closed, we could provide some kind of incentive program so that they can pay back those loans quicker. That puts more revenue back into the fund, which then could go back out as grants. We think that we can turn this around pretty quickly. And we do think that just running some rough estimates, that would probably give us about $65 to $78 million of grants. And those numbers vary because it depends on how fast we get our repayments in the door, how much interest earnings we have, and what kind of disbursements go out the door. So there's a lot of variables there. This is a tricky scenario, but I do think we can commit the funds fairly quickly. And so in conclusion, we do have our existing goal. If you go to the next slide. So we're able to keep that $150 million award amount, right? We didn't have to reduce that because we lost the $20 million. But that $20 million does impact our future program. And so currently we are going to be able, we could do the $60 million in grants and the $90 million in loans as previously planned. However, when we look into the future, starting in 2033, we're going to have to reduce that program. We could do all loans at 12.2 million, or we could do a program that's a combination, no more than 11 million with a grant and loan combination. Now, I just ran a couple of different scenarios so the committee could review it. There's many, many options here. I was just trying to provide some context to give you where we're at financially, both in the short term and in the long term. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the board?
And I do see that Sue Montgomery has her hand raised. Before we start there, I just want to note for agenda item purposes, this is a report that we have under the report section, and I want everyone to feel free to ask Denise as many questions as necessary to sort of understand the financial balance. And then we will go to a whole separate agenda item to talk about what we do in response to that. So I don't want you to think that we're only giving you factual information and not asking you to respond to it or react to it. We will be doing that. The whole purpose of this was to say, this is our current status. This is where we stand. Let you make sure you're clear on what the status is, and then we can go into, okay, what do we do now that we know that information? So, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you very much. Sue.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple questions. One is the most fundamental, I think, for me, which is, are we statutorily obligated to keep this a revolving fund? Or could we disperse it all as grants? I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure I hear it.
Joe, do you want to answer that question before I do?
He is the lawyer, you know.
Just telling General Counsel, there is no statutory prescription specifically answering that question. I believe it's primarily left to the discretion of the board to manage the fund as it deems fit.
Okay, thank you. Then my next question, and it doesn't have to be answered now, but it's what comes to me as I listen to all this, is if we were to disperse it as grants, and you don't have to answer this, I'm just putting it on the table, what do we do in fairness to those that have had to come forward and seek loans? That's really one of my big questions. And then my third question is, again, just putting it on the table, is more of a question of, if we can string this out under one of Denise's scenarios, whether scenario 1 or scenario 2, is there any hope that we would get a future funding source for this, as we should? Those two are more rhetorical. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Sue.
We have Donna with her hand up.
Donna, and then we'll go to Ted.
Donna, I think you're still muted if you're speaking.
We'll go to Ted first, and then we'll come
You
back.
take one summer
there you are.
vacation and you lose it all. Sorry about that. Well, the first comment is, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times, because we sure have done some amazing things up to this point. The worst of times is that this is moving the chairs around on the Titanic. In terms of my sense of this, we don't know what the future holds, but I do hope that we can invest in a way that's going to indemnify us as WIFA from this sort of thing being quite as possible in the near future. One. Two, that in the process of however we use these funds, and I think that requires a deep dive, perhaps in even another meeting, that we really need to think outside the box here, because this is about what is it that WIFA can do to sustain a WIFA in a way that still delivers on our mission. And I, for one, believe we can have our cake and eat it too. But we need to make a really big impact with what is a relatively small amount of money after all is said and done for any particular program. That's not to say it's not life saving for them, but I wonder if the discussion needs to broaden to what is it that we need to do as WIFA in terms of potential partners and augmenting the times we're now in because of the funds being swept, but also protecting us, if possible, from being this vulnerable again because of the relationships that we build. And I think it requires more conversation than probably we can do right now, but that's my first blush thoughts. And I appreciate having the floor, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Ted?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Denise, would you mind going back a couple of slides to one of your graphs with the bars and the lines? Just, okay, these two are fine. So the one thing that we have not discussed this morning explicitly is the gap between 2029, or the gap between 2027 and 2033. And I think we all remember why that exists there. It's basically to be able to accumulate enough interest payments, principal and interest payments on the loans that we would have expected. And this includes through 2029 doing some more loans in order to be able to start the program up again. So the thing that we have not discussed explicitly here is what else might happen between 2027 and 2033. Like has happened in the first, 2-3 years of this particular fund, that could happen in the next 6 or so years. But as far as when principal and interest payments begin on the loans that the board has already approved, and will those amounts not be allowed to accumulate, or if they are for periods of time, will additional criticism besides the criticisms that this organization has received about just letting money sit or not getting it out there fast enough, be reinvigorated by monies coming in as just, it's quote unquote, just sitting there, especially by some observers who might be somewhat transient compared to this schedule that we're looking at here and don't really grasp what the big picture looks like, and possibly despite our best efforts to explain that to them. So I'm not real optimistic about any scenario that involves waiting and doing nothing for 5 or 6 years because of those dangers. I would like to enter into more discussion with this committee and the full board when it gets to that point, to talk about. I think the 3 scenarios that we have to consider are reasonable. We could always come up with 10 if we wanted to, and Denise made that point earlier. I don't think any of them that involve a future combination grant and loan scenario or loan only scenario can be accelerated any earlier than 2033, unless it's going to be $2 million a year. And then And then I believe it's much easier for folks who want to use WIFA funds for something else to take it for something else when it's a smaller amount. And it's also more tempting when there's a large, this is not very much. It won't matter. It won't matter. WIFA can still do what it needs to do. So we should talk about those. I will make one other comment, and I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of it because we're not yet in the debate, but other folks have already brought some things up. So I would be amenable, if this is the way we go, to reconsidering some of the applications that we have in the current funding cycle, because it's not done yet. I would not be in favor of going back to the previous funding cycle and redoing some of that. The loans were always $2 million, and we didn't reach the 60 million that we had set up until the very end of that process. And so I don't know that we would actually have a different outcome if we went back and said, okay, for some of those that were combination loans and grants, let's go back and look at those again. We already looked at them and nothing's changed. Nothing has changed with respect to those in my mind. So I think we'd be wasting a lot of this board's time to go back and do that while we are at risk for the $49 million that we still have to deploy. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Ted. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Anything else, Denise?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. We will go to agenda item number 5, Director McGuire.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. So y'all set us up very well for this discussion, which is basically for me, before I direct staff to approach this in a different way or present a formal option to the board or to this committee of how we should treat this program in the future, for you to have a discussion and give us some direction on what that should look like. As Member Cook just pointed out, Denise lined out 3 different scenarios for us. We could do any iteration of something between those scenarios, but essentially we're sort of looking at a spectrum. So we have the current approach, which was really designed to make this a sustainable revolving fund for a certain amount of years. The phrasing that we used a lot, that we heard a lot, was rural Arizona deserves something that it can depend on, something that it knows is going to be around. There's some predictability to it. That's really what we were trying to accomplish with the current structure. Then on the other side of the spectrum, there's the money out the door. We get it there because we feel like it's not going to be there if we don't get it out the door. Put some words in your mouth here, but essentially to say we'd rather we decide how it gets used as the WIFA board than anybody else decide how it gets used, so that we can ensure it's consistent with the mission that we have. And that's sort of the far end of the spectrum. The financial health and considerations that Denise just outlined are specific to this fund. There's a couple other things I do want to point out, sort of anecdotally, but also kind of empirically as well, across WIFA's programming. The fund that this one is the most likened to across WIFA's funds is the SRF. The State Revolving Fund and the Water Supply Development Revolving Fund have similar purposes. We've had a lot of similar applications coming through those programs. In the initial round especially, there were a lot of projects and a lot of water providers there who chose to apply under the Water Supply Fund because it was more attractive than the SRFs. And so because of that, there was some cannibalization happening on the SRF side. Now we have it the opposite. And we have even some applications, I think, on the current PPL that if you were to look at, they may be considering, hey, we could do better on the SRF side because it's a comparable interest rate, because there is forgivable principal available, which there's not on water supply. So then there's kind of this reverse cannibalization. So what that tells me is that one thing I would really like from this committee, and that would be very valuable, is for this committee to either clarify or re-emphasize what it sees as the purpose of this fund. What kinds of projects it wants to attract, what kinds of borrowers or grantees it wants to attract, to ensure that whatever path forward we take, it is tailor-made for what this committee believes to be the appropriate target audience for this fund. I also think that it's important to have this conversation in light of the PPL that we're going to look at here in just a few minutes, because you'll see on that project priority list that while there is a pretty significant demand for debt financing, it's a little more anemic than what I would have expected. And that's even including the fact that we have legislative authority to lend out more than the original 3 million. We have up to $20 million in authority to lend to any given borrower. We still had just under $17 million in demand across 6 different projects. So I think that's something that's going to be important for this this group to talk about, and how you feel that implicates, or what the implications of that are for how we go forward. We already talked a little bit about treatment of the current loan portfolio and current applications, and then not to circle back and say things that we've already said before, but there is a real timing implication here too. And if the assumption is that the money we have in the fund is static and we will continue to have this throughout the next appropriation cycle, I think that's probably a naive assumption at this point. I don't necessarily want to approach this fund with the assumption that it's only going to be here for the next 9 months, but that may be a helpful thought exercise, right? If it's only going to be here for a certain amount of time, what would this committee's desire be in terms of using that as effectively as it possibly can? So I haven't really asked a distinct or a certifiable question here, but those are the kinds of questions that we have as staff. And now that you all sort of know where we have been thinking, what some of the different scenarios are, I'd be very interested in just an open discussion. This isn't agendized for action, but you can certainly direct me to tell staff to do something or bring back something else to this committee that gives us some direction going forward, whether that's stick with it and do what we've been doing because we did it for a reason, or whether that's here's an alternative approach that we'd like to explore. So after that rambling, Mr. Chair, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board at this time? Ed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Director McGuire, for the introduction here. I think this is the most important of the questions that you posed for us, or was, what is the purpose of this fund? Because the other things, including the bullets on this chart that we're looking at right now, are under the umbrella of, well, what are we trying to do here? And without oversimplifying things, it's called a Water Supply Development Fund. It also says revolving, but that's kind of in doubt. Because if there's some things that we can control and some things that we can't, and knowing which is which could be very helpful to us. But in those instances when we have funds to disperse, we are in control of that, including what does water supply development mean. And I think the words are very plain. That's not always true, but the words to me are very plain here. Water supply development. Supply to me implies that it is more than a one-time thing, that is going to last for a short period of time. It is something that will be developed as one of the other words here that defines that. So it doesn't exist today, or it exists and it's going to be enhanced in some way. Those types of things. But the two first words are the most important words. Water supply. It has to be, in my mind, the best use of this fund is for water supply development. So this is more water for the applicants than they otherwise would have had if we didn't fund them. Very, very clear cut in my mind. I appreciate that what Director McGuire said about our, it's not a policy, but it's more of a practice to point applicants to this fund to other things that might be more appropriate, such as the SRFs. And the SRFs have been around for a long, long time, not just here in Arizona, but a lot of other places. And for clean water and drinking water, there are water supply development type activities that might be appropriate for those funds. It might be difficult to judge. Is it more appropriate for a particular activity to get funded by that or for this one? But it's easy for me, for one, to exclude what things are not appropriate for this fund. So things like building a water tank or refurbishing some part of the wastewater treatment or something like that. Those things are clearly for those other funds and ought to be routed over that way, without regard to whether or not forgivable principal is available or not, that we're trying to substitute that for maybe somebody that wants a grant that is not available under this program. So to me, it's a pretty bright line about what this program is for.
Thank you, Ted. Appreciate that. Are there any other comments from members of the board? If not, we'll go to agenda item number 6 and turn the,
We had a hand up, but I'm not sure.
Did
whose
we?
it was.
I looked and saw nothing.
A hand came up and then it came down. Anybody want to claim it?
That was my hand, but
Oh, okay.
but Chairman, I'll just defer for now so we can keep going here.
Okay. Don't hesitate if you have a thought. Agenda item number 6, and we will look at the 2027 Water Supply Development Project Priority List, and Lindsay will lead that discussion.
Thank you very much. So on the screen here, we have our FY 2027 Water Supply Project Priority List. So this agenda item would be to have the committee do a review of all of the applications and the ranking as presented. So to start off though, I do want to just begin with a quick reminder of the updates that we made to this program through our policy updates that we did in December of 2025. So if you remember, we did update the process for the application cycle really to make it so that there's discrete funding cycles and not an open application window like the previous funding cycle was. So this means we set a specific deadline for each of the 2 different parts of the application process. The first application is our project priority list application. So these are all of the applicants who submitted that initial application by our deadline, which was May of 2026. So that deadline is passed. We're not accepting new applications under this funding cycle. But this design was really to give the committee and the board the opportunity to review every application received during that window before making decisions on actual projects that are on the list here. So after today and the next steps would be for our applicants to submit their project finance applications, and we would be presenting those projects at a future date at the earliest in October or November for the committee and the board to make actual recommendations on the individual projects. So during that PPL application window, though, as was noted, we did receive 6 applications, resulting in $16.75 million worth of requests. And so today we have that rank list in front of you where the WIFA staff has gone through and reviewed each application and ranked and scored it on this list. And we are looking for the committee's feedback and recommendation on whether to approve the PPL list as presented or recommend it to the board to approve. And again, this would not be approving individual projects, but just the list overall. So I'm happy to take any questions on the list or the overall application process.
Lindsay, can you just quickly run down how these ranks were assigned? You know, why there's a project with a lower index score that's ranked higher than one with a higher index score?
Yeah, absolutely. So the ranks are based on their overall points, where the index score is a combination of their overall points compared to their financial need points on a grid to determine the index scores. So the 65% index score, as a reminder, that means their loan interest rate will be subsidized by 65%. So they will only pay 65% of what the market rate is compared to someone who has an 80% index rate would pay an interest rate of 80% of what the market rate is. So lower is better in that case, but the PPL ranking overall is based on their total points received, and that's going to be based on different criteria, including the water demand points, the feasibility points, the financial need points, and there's one other that's escaping me, but one other criteria as well. So.
Thank you, Lindsay. Any questions or comments from the board? Does the committee have any questions? Specifically to the applicants, even though they aren't here, right?
We did not invite the applicants for committee questions to this,
Okay.
but we would be when we're presenting the projects for approval.
Yeah, so just for a comparison, this is akin to in the board meeting when we approved the PPL for the state revolving fund. So the federal programs committee had already seen that, a project priority list. This is the equivalent of that, but on the water supply side.
Well, at this time, I would entertain a motion for agenda item number 6 to adopt the 2027 Water Supply Development Project Priority List.
This is Drew John. I will make the motion that we approve the 2027 funding cycle project priority list on July 26th.
Do we have a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ted. Is there any discussion on the motion? No further discussion. We will call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. The motion passes. We'll go to agenda item number 7, call to the public. This is the time for any additional public comments. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Are there any requests for public comments, Ben?
There are no requests to speak on this item.
Okay. Agenda development. This is the opportunity for members to identify any topics they would like to be placed on the agenda at a future meeting. Director McGuire.
So I guess maybe it's less agenda development, but maybe just giving the committee the opportunity to go back to our discussion about what would you like staff to bring to you for consideration for the future of this program? Is there a discrete funding cycle structure that you would like to bring us? Would you like us to bring you additional options for those? You know, we've had some good ideas, we've had some good opinions, but I think a more robust discussion there so that we can appropriately respond to what you're looking for would be super helpful for future development. So we've got Sue's hand up and Donna's hand up.
Sue.
Mr. Chairman, I do think we need a lot more discussion here. And to be honest, I'm a little even uncomfortable with approving a PPL when we seem to not even be sure what our future looks like. Recognizing that these people, though, these applicants have invested their time in this funding cycle to get on the PPL. So, and that's why I voted for it. But I really think we need to have a full, robust discussion on this. And I'd like to hear, more about the political ramifications of this. There was some allusion to that today. I think we need to understand those risks better, and be mindful, not be myopic about, what we want to do here and what we did before. I'm completely open-minded to doing whatever needs to be done. I thought Pete wasn't here today, but I do recall when we wrestled with this previously, and we knew we were going to have to do this split on loans and grants. Pete had asked the question, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the question is, should we just get all the money out the door now because it does the most good now? So, I'd like to learn more about what that really means, and both politically, but also for our applicants. I would like to learn about, when I think of this, further understanding on how this relates with the SRFs. Is this a situation where we look at our applicants and say, if you can go to the SRF, you should go to the SRF, and do we reserve this solely for those folks that can't do that or that don't have the capability of doing that for whatever reason? Or the project is so small but so needy and so acute. I just feel like there's a lot of discussion here we need to have. And so I just think more needs to be set aside to do that. And I'm open for whatever the staff wants to bring us in that discussion. But each one of the points that we've talked about, I think, needs to be unpacked further. And as always, I appreciate the comments of Mr. Cook and find myself always thinking deeper about everything. So thank you for that, Mr. Cook. So that was my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Donna.
So there's no doubt that every applicant that we looked at and actually approved today is worthy. The hesitancy on my part was simply that, much in alignment with where I think Sue is going, is for us to understand what that's all going to mean. And by that, I mean reduced by however many, 20 million, and counting, to fund either through grant or loan. It seems to me that, much like, when you board an airplane and it's time to put the seats and tables in the upright locked position, and we are admonished to be sure that we take the oxygen mask and affix it to our faces before we try to help anybody else. I'm concerned deeply, in terms of, organizationally, whether we have had the mechanism to fully appreciate and explore options that could help WIFA and specific, of course, this committee, to gain or regain capacity, which is desperately needed for us to fulfill our mission. And so that's long-winded, but that's what happens with professors coming back from summer vacation. I'm concerned that there's a need to look at, are we missing anything here? What else should we be doing as a committee, and giving direction to Chelsea and her team to be exploring on behalf of the water supply, but with it in general. And I don't know where that kind of conversation is permissible to take place, but I certainly think this organization and this committee's work deserves that exploration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Donna. Go ahead, Ted. I know you got something to say.
I do. And thank you again. And I agree with everything that Sue and Donna said, both the things that were exhortative, let's do this, and also the things that were cautionary, is we need to stop and think about this more on all of these, because some of these things that we decide to do, once we decide to do them, will be irrevocable mostly. Once we decide to do it, then we're kind of on that path. Some of them are more open to having to be updated later, not going backwards, but just going forward to be different than what we decided to do. But when I think about the next meeting and what ought to be agendized on there, I think there are three things, and they're all related to each other. And the order does matter, but I'm not prepared to suggest what order it should be. But I think the first one ought to be this existential discussion about what is the fund for? Should we be more toward one side or the other of this continuum that Director McGuire presented to us earlier, of get the money out the door or try to have a revolving fund? That needs to come first, because it will greatly influence what we decide to do on the other two things. And the other two things are which are related to each other. And I'm not convinced that this order doesn't matter on those two. And what those two are is, what would a future funding cycle look like? And the second one is, what will this funding cycle that we're in the middle of look like? And you could really go a couple of ways. We could do it in one order or the other order. And if we decide, well, we're going to, I'll take the easy one first. We're going to decide on the future funding cycle and what that looks like first. Then we would come back and look at, well, based on that decision, whatever it might have been, should we make any changes in the current funding cycle? For instance, if we decide, well, we're going to just go all loans or all grants and get the money out the door, then we should, I think, logically reconsider, well, should we change anything? Should we offer loans to the folks that are kind of in process on this other one? If you do it the other way around and make the one decision first, then the other one, you might end up with the same outcome, or you might not. So part of my comment is to make a request to the staff to do a decision tree analysis. It doesn't have to be very complicated, because there's not that many options. I mean, you can make more options if you want to between one bookend and the other bookend of out the door or revolving fund. that will make the most sense to you all about what order we go in the next time, so that we don't find ourselves at the next meeting going around in circles or getting caught up in a dependency type of thing about, well, we should have done that before we did this type of thing.
Thank you, Ted. Since our inception as the new WIFA, we have deliberately approached projects slowly to make sure that we are dotting the i's and crossing the t's. And some of the legislators understand that and some of them don't. And so as we approach this and as we understand how to move forward based upon the things that you all have shared today, I would ask you to consider being bold moving forward as there are demands and needs now, and to be able to help the legislators understand that this is where we need to make the investments based upon our strategy. I think that is probably one of the most important directions that we can move, and demonstrating that leadership, demonstrating that we understand the current challenges and demand, and that we are moving forward to alleviate the stress on the system as it stands today. Sue, you still have your hand up?
Well, I wanted to respond a little bit, Mr. Chairman, but I don't want to
Go ahead.
interrupt you. Well, in terms of what Mr. Cook said, the 1, 2, and 3, I mean, I think we have to make, I think this deliberate is fine in some things. I think we just got to rip the Band-Aid off. I think we need to make a decision, and I think we need to have that robust conversation together in short order. And I would say on the 1, 2, and 3, just my personal opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, but we need to decide where this fund's going to go. We start with 1, that's a given, right? What's our mission? What do we want to do with this fund? What are we allowed to do with this fund? And I agree with the supply focus, and let's go to the very fundamentals of this. And then I think we have to quickly ask ourselves, what are we going to do in the future? What are we going to do with the rest of this fund? And once we decide what that is, then you have to go back and you do have to look at this funding cycle, because I think we have to be fair to those people that are in this funding cycle. But I think we need to rip the darn Band-Aid off and get this thing moving. I don't want to be hasty, but I agree also with you, Mr. Chairman, that there's, this allegation that we're perhaps being too slow or too deliberate. We have to balance that with the need to be deliberate and be smart. But, we've had a lot of conversation about this initially, about how we were going to move this fund forward. I think we have all that in our mind. And now it's time to just make a new decision based upon what has happened. And I'm prepared to do that. And with the staff's guidance and on that decision tree idea, I think that'd be very valuable. But let's get going on this, and let's do this, because there's a lot of folks that are going to be waiting, and there's going to be a lot of folks watching. So, and there's a lot of needs. I mean, you could get all of this out the door tomorrow, for the needs that are out there. We just want to make sure we do it the right way and the proper way, and the way that's consistent with our mission and our statutory obligations.
Donna with her hand.
Donna?
You're muted, Donna, if you're speaking.
Let me try that again. Thank you. Third time's the charm. Yes, I think time is ticking away, and I think some of the hesitancy from at least this board member is a lack of assurance about what is the prohibitions, if you will, if any, statutorily, that could have negative impacts on our ability to move forward in a more, not more innovative, but different. We haven't needed to be anything except responsive in many ways because the need is so great. But it does feel to me like we need a primer again. Thanking Chelsea in advance on, making sure we have a handle on the prohibitions and the potential, or if statute is silent to some opportunity that we might consider. And I think we need to do that as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Mr.
With
Chairman.
that, if there's no other comments, the next Water Supply Development Committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 18th, 2026, 1 p.m. here in this room.
But I would say, Mr. Chairman, based on the foregoing conversation, we will have some things scheduled much sooner than that.
Thank you.
This has been very helpful in terms of giving, I think, staff a clear directive that we do not want to stay with the status quo, which is exactly what we needed. We will bring this kind of decision tree idea to the next meeting, and then we will have options for programs that fit whatever the end results of those decision trees are for your recommendation to the board. I won't commit to a firm timeline, but I can certainly say that the next meeting would happen within the next 4 to 6 weeks, I think is probably realistic given some of the bandwidth we've got going on the long-term side as well. So
Why don't we determine that, the date of the next meeting at our next board meeting?
yeah, we can pull for it as
Okay.
well. So I think that makes a lot of sense. This has been a helpful discussion, and I appreciate the time of the committee members today.
If there's nothing else, we will adjourn this meeting of the WIFA Water Supply Development Committee meeting, and we are adjourned
Thank you.
at 1:51.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
to see you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.